In this video, I'm going to show you how to use wave files and text grids together in Praat to measure and understand voice onset time, which is a phonetic property that helps us distinguish between different kinds of stops. Specifically in English, we can use it to measure the difference between the stops at the beginning of the word tie versus the word die. We're going to start with an example from Hindi, and you can see that in my Praat Objects window, I've already loaded in a sound file and a text grid that match one another. So I open them together by selecting them both and clicking View and Edit, which shows me the waveform, the spectrogram, and then the text grids, which is a kind of text annotation linked to specific time points in the wave file. And you can see that I have inserted labels on the text grid that correspond to the different utterances. So there are 6 different syllables or words spoken in this sound file, and I have split them all up using these labels so that I can now more easily find them. So what we're going to do first is zoom into Pal, and you notice I did that by selecting a particular area of the text grid so that it turns yellow, and then clicking the SEL button to zoom in to the selected area. So this is Pal, and we can play it by clicking on the gray button. And what we want to do is measure the voice onset time. And you remember that the voice onset time, as we discussed, is the time between the release of a closure, that's this right here, that's the closure, or sorry, that's the release of the stop. So it's the time between the release of a closure and the start of voicing in the vowel, which is right here. So how do we get that time? It's not that difficult, and Praat can help you. So to start, zoom in, and we're going to place the cursor just before the burst, just to the left of the burst. And that gives us a red vertical line when we click. And down in the tier of the text grid that's labeled burst, I can click on the little blue dot, and that gives us a marker. So this is now an annotation point, and we can type when it is selected red like it is right now. I'm going to type B for burst. Next, I'm going to go to the beginning of the vowel, and I'm going to click right at the beginning of the voicing in the vowel. And once again, I have a red vertical line that gives me blue dots on the burst tier and the other tiers of the text grid as well. And if I click, I get a new marker, and I'm going to type V for vowel. So what we now want to find is the difference between B and V, and we're going to let Praat help us with that as well. So the way we're going to do that is by using the VOT tier to be able to add more text annotations. So if I click again on B, I get more blue dots on the other tiers, and if I click on the dot for the VOT tier, I now get a solid line. So what we're now creating is an interval rather than a point in time. So an interval spans a period of time, whereas a point simply marks a single moment in time. And now we can actually just measure the VOT very easily. So the voice onset time in this case is this duration of the selected area, and you can see the duration at the top of the waveform and also below the text grid. It's 0.014287, and that is a duration in seconds, which we can put into milliseconds, and it's about 14 milliseconds. That's a positive voice onset time. So that's how we measure the voice onset time for an unaspirated voiceless stop like the one in Pal. But we also want to measure the voice onset time of a voiced unaspirated stop like the one in Bal. And you can see that Bal is very different because it has this long period of voicing in the closure. So this actually means that voicing starts before the burst, right? So if voice onset time is the time between the release of a closure and the start of voicing, well, voicing starts before the release. So voice onset time in this case is negative. All right, so how do we get negative voice onset time? Let's have a look. The first thing that we want to do is still to mark the burst itself. And so we can mark that with a B. And then we can go back over to the left and we can mark the beginning of the voicing. So this is the start of voicing during the closure itself. And the next thing that we want to do is measure the difference there. If you want to, you can also mark where the vowel itself kicks in. But we're not going to use that to measure the voice onset time because we know the voice onset time is going to be negative. It's going to be this amount to the left of the burst. And if we have a look at the duration up here of the selected interval, it says 0.083952. So that is about 84 milliseconds. But remember, this is negative voice onset time, so it's negative 84 milliseconds. So now we have measured VOT two different ways, and we've also seen how to insert labels in the text grid, and we can now use those to navigate. And the last thing that we want to do is, before quitting Praat, we want to make sure to save the text grid, because if you do not save the text grid from within Praat, Praat will not save it for you, and it will not give you any warnings. It will just throw away your work when you close the program. So to save the text grid, click the Save button and then click Save as Text File. Give your file a name with the extension .textgrid and then click Save. In my case, I already had it in my system, so I'm just going to replace it. And that is how you use a text grid and a wave file to measure voice onset time.